Strike Force detectives went public in February this year to reveal they had reopened the Stacey Lee Kirk murder investigation. The 16-year-old's body was discovered concealed under a tarp near a Maitland Showground toilet block on February 18, 1984. She'd been strangled and sexually assaulted. The results of those recent police inquiries are now ready to be presented to the state coroner.
And we've been reporting to him regularly. Now he's decided to hold another inquest into Stacey Kirk's death.
The original inquest in 1988 returned an open finding into the cause of the teenager's death. An arrest for the murder was eventually made in 1991, but the case collapsed when witnesses refused to give evidence. Police will present new evidence to the coroner in August, including the results of DNA profiling used during the latest investigations. Detective Sergeant Pollock says public help has also assisted investigators.
We had police go to various states to interview people. It generated quite a lot of interest, which I think is now going to enable us to wind this up completely.
2 days have been set aside for State Coroner John Abernathy to hear the latest police information. The inquest opens here at East Maitland Courthouse on the 4th of August. Gary Blair, NBN News.
In an age where sports are getting more extreme by the day, these guys can make a BMX do things many would think impossible. Seemingly defying gravity and probably some of their mothers' wishes as well, these young riders bend over backwards to find new ways to thrill. Having placed 5th at the National X Games, it was easy to see why Luke Weatherall is rated one of the country's best. Still just 18, Luke already competes full-time, but you get the feeling it's more a passion than a profession for him.
I've tried most sports like soccer and football and stuff, and it just didn't excite me. Like when I started busting tricks that people love and people can't do, I suppose it's just adrenaline.
Hoping to soon head to the lucrative US circuit, Luke certainly set a standard today that others tried hard to match. And not everyone got the landing they were after. Reece Macy, one of many to find out there's a fine but hard line between a great touchdown and almost. Given the success of this, the first ever Newcastle Trail Jam, plans are already underway for other extreme events in the region.
The best vantage point was on television, and 5 cameras covered the spectacle. While immense in scale and 3 months in the planning, the engineering was simple. White ant the foundations, and with a little pulling power, let gravity do the rest.
Basically, we weaken the structure to a point where it will stand there until it gets a certain amount of force exerted on it. Once we put that force on, it comes straight down.
In other words, you pulled it down with some big machines.
Basically, yeah, that's about it.
BHP Billiton's demolition manager, Vaughan Martin, is praising the expertise of the 30 people still working on the site, 90% of whom are locals.
I don't know of any other large redundant industrial facility that has been demolished as rapidly as this after closure.
The only major structures still to be brought down are the number 3 and number 4 blast furnaces, the first of which will fall in a month. The site's expected to be levelled by Christmas. What happens to it after that is up to the state government.
The land will be used for other purposes, heavy industrial purposes, hopefully a multi-purpose terminal. There is a development approval to build a multi-purpose terminal here, but it's up to the government and private enterprise to see that through.
Along with ownership of the land, BHP Billiton also handed over $100 million to the state for its remediation.
Just 7 minutes into yesterday's game and Wayne Clifford was marched. This tackle on Luke Thomas deemed too high, and the Blues captain will front the judiciary tonight. The incident followed an earlier high shot by prop Clayton Witten. One could question what he had to do to be sent off as well. Andrew Taylor, meanwhile, would have been thankful his high shot also resulted in just a penalty. In Newcastle rugby, Eastern Districts flanker Graham Clear will front the NRU judiciary on Wednesday night after he was sent off for kicking in this match against Wanderers. ARU guidelines suggest he could face at least a 9-week suspension. In Black Diamond AFL, Terrigal Avoca and Warners Bay both won, while the Blues hammered Killarney Vale. A win in the dying seconds helped keep Phoenix North on top of the Premier Hockey League, while South's win increased their buffer over Maitland for second. Needing a win to stay in touch with the top two, Maitland defended well early, but knew it was never going to be easy. Grabbing the first goal was a big help. But that's when South headed back in the right direction. After some great saves, Stu Fletcher breached the defence. Maitland came close to levelling it again, but South came home too strong, a 2-1 half-time lead ending in a 4-goal win. And Horizons touring golf professional Cherie Burns has finished tied for 7th at the Ladies Irish Open after shooting 9 under par for the tournament. Sweden's Sophie Gustafsson won the event.
Peter Blackmore left Newcastle Court late this afternoon, flanked by family and friends, finally free of the allegations which have dogged him over the past 15 months. Last month, child sex charges levelled by 2 women were thrown out, and today, as a committal hearing resumed, the court heard more evidence about 5 remaining charges relating to a 65-year-old woman. She alleged Mr Blackmore raped her in the early 1980s, but in the witness box he strongly denied the claims. "I have never raped the woman." The defence pointed to inconsistencies in the woman's story, claiming a jury would be unlikely to believe it. And Magistrate Richard Mazowski agreed, adding that Mr Blackmore's evidence hadn't wavered. He said there's no reasonable prospect of a jury convicting in the circumstances. The defence was highly critical of the police handling of the case and applied for costs, which were granted, with the amounts still to be determined. Outside the court, Mr Blackmore declined to speak to the media, but released a statement through his solicitor. These allegations have affected his character and put him at risk as to his liberty, and caused great distress and illness to his family and friends. Mr Blackmore also extended his thanks to those who supported him throughout the case. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News. It's touted as the future of healthcare, bringing together a range of services in one inner-city building. The polyclinic will be built on this site in Hunter Street West and will house services currently at the Royal Newcastle Hospital, as well as some new ones, including an after-hours GP, X-ray and pathology.
It's the change in the future of health services will be from community-based facilities, and there's a true emphasis on that in this, and it's a standalone facility.
The 5-storey facility will also have room for commercial ventures like a pharmacy and coffee shop, as well as office space. The development was approved last night by Newcastle Council after debate about parking and disabled access. The Lord Mayor says he's now satisfied it's what the city needs.
We've seen a lot of units developed, and that's bringing people living back in the city, but now we're seeing the services expand and improve. So what's happening is very, very important to the future of the city.
The polyclinic and another larger health facility on the John Hunter campus will both open in 2006 as the Royal closes. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News. Sleep disorders are becoming increasingly common, and here at Royal Newcastle Hospital, researchers are constantly looking for solutions and treatments. But they've been searching out answers to the same questions as other medical minds. Now the knowledge will be shared under a partnership formed between the Hunter Medical Research Institute and Sydney's Woolcock Institute.
We'll have a big brains trust, so all the people that work here and in Sydney will be able to pool their ideas. And importantly, we'll be able to run studies.
The studies will be larger and more comprehensive than a single institute could produce. Already a joint project is underway looking at how asthmatics can reduce their medication. Researchers hope to have results early next year, with many more similar studies to follow.
We hope that this partnership will give us clear answers to important questions in a much quicker time frame.
Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
The plan to address the teething problems with Sydney's new passenger fleet came from several hours of talks after Transport Minister Michael Costa inspected the project on Wednesday. He didn't complain about workmanship, rather the way State Rail and the company have managed the project. The Minister today revealed the main concerns with the Millennium train involved the traction, train operating and communication systems and air conditioning. Problems described as issues of reliability, not safety, prompting Workers' Union Newcastle Secretary Kevin Maher to demand an apology from the state opposition.
I think the employers at EDI would be looking forward to a visit and a personal apology by Mr Brockton.
The next battle for workers and the company is to secure the third stage of the project for another 25 Millennium trains. The government isn't contractually committed and has until the end of the year to make the decision, but the union wants Premier Bob Carr to think carefully about the deal.
I think once the teething problems are sorted out with this process put in place by the Minister, the Premier will certainly see the value.
Gary Blair, NBN News. Maitland Showground Paceway has been a hotbed of discontent for months because of the speculation about the future of racing at the venue. Now the local industry has been told its days are numbered under a Harness Racing New South Wales strategic plan, which proposes to end racing here in September after 76 years.
Yeah, devastation, I suppose, would be a fair way to put it for the local participants.
The Maitland industry will get its first chance on Monday to personally tell Harness Racing New South Wales Chief Executive Damien Raidler what it thinks of the plan. The club then has until July 31 to present a compelling case to the organisation as to why the $1.5 million a year local industry should continue racing and not join forces with the Newcastle Harness Racing Club. With the future of harness racing at Maitland and also Muswellbrook now firmly in the balance, the scene is set for 6 weeks of intense lobbying. Harness Racing New South Wales is expected to be told by the hunter industry that the proposals should be scrapped.
There are a number of tracks being closed, so I think the office will be bombarded by these submissions, which I think is a good thing. It makes the process more transparent.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Wyong came to Cessnock still looking for a pot of gold in the form of a finals berth, but the hosts were quick to rain on the ruse parade. Sean Bailey, certainly no leprechaun, and using that fact to full effect. With both teams coming off a loss, no quarter was given or taken. Unruly scenes may be, but it took a wild man in the form of Lindsay Wild to help the ruse bounce back. Wyong was in fact its own worst enemy late in the first half, with the ball coughed up 4 times in front of Cessnock's line. The league leaders went to the break in front 6-4 and piled on the points in the second half, winning 32-18. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
It's serious business, but there's still something amusing about watching someone ride a motorbike half the recommended size. Paul Harrigan, Tony Butterfield and Matty Parsons have all put up their hand to raise money for the Footy Show's Anthony McCrowan appeal, each riding legs of the Sydney to Tamworth journey. And not unlike being on the paddock, sledging plays a crucial role here too.
Yeah, unfortunately Butsy's their team, he's holding us up a little bit, but he's a good kid. We won't go mad on him, but it's been good for him because he was on a bike when he was 8-year-old. Apparently he fell off, hasn't been on one since.
He's a reasonable motorbike rider, but he's a disgraceful car driver, so I think I've got one off on him there.
But the serious side of today's training involves raising money for Anthony, who was injured trialling for the Knights 7 years ago. He'll be confined to a wheelchair in the near future and won't receive a cent in insurance. an issue Butterfield is currently addressing as head of the Players Association.
It's something that certainly all players are concerned about, and whilst we want to address the insurance issues going forward, we want to deal with the current situation and then move on from there.
The ride begins on Thursday night's footy show. Stephen Mount, NBN News.
Broadmeadow trainer Paul Perry returned to Newcastle this morning after the most amazing 3 weeks of his life, and a horse called Choisir is the reason he looks like the happiest man in the world. That was the 3-year-old colt's first win in England, and probably the last time he starts at 38-1.
No, I think if any Aussie horse went over there from now on, I reckon they'd be, having a real good look at them for sure.
But that victory was the start of a whirlwind journey for Perry that included meeting the Queen.
I think she's such a horse lover. She spoke about her own horses, and she was happy she hasn't got a sprinter to have to race against us. She thought he was the quickest horse she's seen, she said. And no, she was real easy to talk to.
It's not easy for the Mayfield-bred horseman to choose a highlight, but he likens every English race meeting to being in the stands at the Melbourne Cup.
The ones who go there are real racing purists. I think they enjoyed the horse winning more than what we did. The ovations he got, geez, you'd have to be there to appreciate it.
Choisir's second win has seen the horse become the hottest property in international racing, with most studs showing interest. But a decision hasn't yet been made on the star 3-year-old's future, which could include one more run in the UK next month.
This time last year, few people knew of these two, but with a World Youth title in their keeping, Nathan and Aiden have become marked men. Well, teenagers at least.
I think we should be fine. I think we know that there's probably a bit of pressure on us to sort of back up and do it again, but as long as we sort of stay in the right mind frame and concentrate on what we've got to do, then I think we'll be fine.
Sailing in the 420 class, the pair won both the national junior and senior titles earlier this year, but it's overseas that they want world title number 2, before tackling more senior events against the best.
We race against some guys and it's going to be the best year in Europe because everyone's fighting for their position for their country, so it's going to be the massive learning curve we can possibly have.
While both also juggled Year 12 studies, the newly crowned State Junior Sailor of the Year will only be studying the unknown Portugal conditions in the lead-up to the Worlds.
We've been to Sydney a few times and we're training out in the ocean, and we've actually been into Newcastle Harbour and done some training out just off Nobby's Head there and all that, so we've been trying to sort of get used to all different sorts of conditions.
In rugby, Newcastle's Anthony Barrett scored a New South Wales Country's win against Queensland in the Australian Rugby Shield match at Moree at the weekend. The Cockatoos won 29-23. Scone made it 6 from 6 in Group 21 Rugby League, while Muswellbrook increased its gap on Denman with a 52-32 win. 1-goal wins for Gosford, North and West in Premier Hockey League action, with South drawing with the entrance. And in ice hockey, New South Wales has won the coveted Brown Trophy played overnight at Warners Bay. Not a bad way to celebrate a win and a new contract with Newcastle. It didn't matter how he hit them, the relief of signing a new deal was relaxing enough. The big prop making his decision early today after supporters got in his ear after the win against Parramatta.
No, I didn't expect that at all. So that's all. Everyone knows how good the crowd is here and the fans, and that was certainly a big factor in it.
Newcastle, born and bred, the rising Blue Star can see his best football is yet to come under the red and blue banner.
If I don't, fulfill my potential here, I'm not going to do it anywhere.
And the club is also confident of signing Daniel Abraham, a deal understood to be all but completed. If Andrew Johns was worried about being on report, he hardly looked it. With son Samuel, the world's best player was a pushover. It wasn't the case yesterday as he orchestrated another night's win and is now set to take on the Bulldogs this weekend.
They had a close game yesterday, so the Dogs religiously have a good game against, pretty close tussle against them, so the boys will be looking forward to that one.
Spot the Beagle has one of the keenest noses around, and when it comes to his work at Sydney Airport, there's rarely a piece of meat, grain or plant life that passes him by. Around 1,000 students will take part in AQUIS's 7th Hunter Open Days this week, the only program of its type in Australia.
This process is all about educating children in relation to the quarantine issues, how they need to declare when they come through the barriers, how they need to be aware of what quarantine does in protecting Australia.
While X-ray technology now screens all luggage leaving and entering Australia, there are only 2 of these mobile X-ray vans in the country, often used to process passengers from cruise ships.
We can see the shapes, but the machine can tell us what they're made out of as well.
Organic items show up as orange in colour, shells green and metals blue or black. But for the hundreds of thousands of shipping containers that arrive on our docks, a good old-fashioned inspection gets the best results.
We find quite often in international airports around Australia that when the parents are coming through the quarantine barrier, the children are actually telling their parents what they need to declare. And they've got a responsibility, like everybody in Australia, to protect Australia from injurious pests and disease.
The Worimi Land Council owns around 750 hectares of Stockton Beach, employing 6 rangers who patrol the area, removing rubbish and salvaging vehicles. But a dispute over revenue raised from beach permits could lead to recreational users being locked out if an agreement can't be reached with Port Stephens Council. Worimi Land Council is asking for its share of around $40,000 to assist with the upkeep of its land.
That agreement is substantially complete. There's always the final wording that takes a little bit longer to resolve.
But if that agreement isn't reached soon, Worimi may be forced to restrict access until it can meet its public liability requirements.
And to ensure that entirety of the beach, is the price is astronomical, but we have to do it. Now, if we have to do it and not getting any money back, then wouldn't you, as the landowner, restrict entry to your land, just as a safety factor?
The Worimi Land Council says its parcel of land on Stockton Beach comes with an operating cost of $300,000.
We don't rob Peter to pay Paul. We have a trust thing here where we can't do that. And we aren't cash strapped as a lot of people think. What money we generate here is from astute business ventures. So it's just to provide wages.
NAIDOC Week is especially significant for Windale Public School. 58 of its students are either Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders. Some are descendants from the area's 3 Aboriginal tribes, the Awabakal, Worimi and Batabar people. Other Indigenous people also joined in today's celebrations. Tongan, Maori, Samoan and Filipino dancers make up the group known as Pacific Harmony.
I wanted to really get to know what my culture was about, and really it makes me happy when I dance, and I like seeing all my other friends at school be happy dancing.
The group are all students of Hunter Sports High School.
I was taught by an older friend, and he's in a bigger group than I am, and yeah, I enjoyed watching them, so I thought I'd want to do that.
Meanwhile, 60 international students from the University of Newcastle were given a send-off today. While they've completed their degrees, many will be unable to return for the official graduation ceremony. More than 2,000 international students study at the university each year. Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
She thought the city had a heart and a soul, and even the industrial side was beautiful.
These artists, the 12 of them, have been innovators over the last 50 years and have created the most wonderful works in Australian art history. And what we have here is a selection of their works, all housed within the Newcastle Region Art Gallery's collection.
Neighbours called the fire brigade when smoke was noticed coming from the home at about 9 last night. The outbreak damaged the front half of the house and most of its contents. Police and the fire brigade are continuing inquiries into how the fire started.
Some of the Hunters' past and present defence personnel have been in the spotlight today. They marched along the Newcastle foreshore as part of the local event to mark Reserve Forces Day. The parade is an annual opportunity for Australians to say thank you to all military reservists. It was Newcastle's biggest reserve parade, with the ranks swelled by Navy personnel and cadets from the 3 services.
The Hunter Festival of Sport is all about getting involved, and 150 competitors from across the state took to today's swimming at Curry like ducks to water.
Maybe they were swimmers when they were younger and now they've got their kids off their hands so they can get back into swimming.
The age division spanned 6 decades, and in keeping with the festival's theme, competition was as serious as you wanted. To netball, and the toughest thing about day one of the state age championships was probably playing the whistle. But the 3,000 competitors across 3 venues somehow stayed focused as the long haul of roughly 25 round matches began to decide winners across 4 age groups. The titles wrap up on Monday. Despite fielding plenty of reservists, West still started strong, Dane Thorogood capitalising on a Ben Donaldson kick. Things almost went from bad to worse for Cessnock, but the Rosella's next effort was ruled offside, and while the points had dried up, the punches were flowing, both proponents earning 10 in the bin. The dust settled and the Goannas were first to find the gap, captain coach Dan Smales leading by example, and it didn't take others long to follow, Brett Cullen finding Daniel Spiteri to see Cessnock up 10-6 in a matter of minutes. West, though, weren't backing down. Jay Bolton's intercept making it 10-all at the break, and his team won the second half sprint to the line as well, 24 points to 16.
Highfields had the home ground advantage and needed to use it to make the playoffs next month. Western started solidly, with the second-place Bears spending most of the opening stanza in Wolf territory. Tony Majerovski tried hard but couldn't get his side on the board to match an early Western goal. A revitalised Highfields took to the park for the second half, and Majerovski almost got the equaliser after 10 minutes. But the Black and Whites were equal to the task, Peter Budden testing Wolves keeper Ben Smith. The match featured a high penalty count, which included Highfield's Lindsay Henderson being yellow carded for this tackle on Nigel Bugard. Western eventually won 2-1. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's already been a big year for Keegan Wolfenden, but it's about to get even busier. Making his NSL debut this season for Newcastle United, the AIS-based player is about to tour America with the Institute squad before joining his Joey teammates for the World Cup in Finland, among them good mate Nigel Bugard.
It's good. We've been mates for a while, so we always room up and freak out a couple of the lads, but...
The 16-year-old has already tasted football in Finland early this year, but can only imagine what to expect in the biggest tournament of his career. Australia face a tough task to reach the finals, with Argentina, Nigeria and Costa Rica in their group, but their coach has faith in his team.
Well, when you think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the boys made the final, and to say that we're as good as them, it does lift the spirits in the team, and the boys do get a kick out of it.
Meanwhile, in Group 21 Rugby League, little change in the leaderboard, with Scone and Masterbrook still running 1-2. Terrigal Avoca and Cardiff enjoyed good wins in round 11 of Black Diamond AFL, while Newcastle City smashed Gosford by 191. And a forfeit has gifted West a 3-0 win in Premier League hockey, while a 6-goal thrashing of Leaders North also gave South a huge boost. Just getting through the numbers is enough to tire you out, but imagine being one of the 3,300 competitors in the 283-team competition. As you could imagine, there wasn't too much unused space either on or around netball courts like Lakeside over the last 3 days. Together with Charlestown and Newcastle, the venues hosted a division of the State Age Championship for 12-year-olds to 15s, with each site hosting just over 1,000 games each day. On home courts, Lakeside's under-14s started the final day undefeated, but still faced 8 more matches before the state title was decided. After losing their first game, they hit back against Hastings Valley. They won 13-10, but after some narrow losses, they settled for equal third overall. A number of talent identification squads are now to be selected from the championship. Bruised and battered, Josh Perry suffered another body blow today, overlooked for an Origin spot. His front row partner Adam Woolner could see the lighter side of yesterday's meeting with the Bulldogs on the Sydney club's best day of the season so far.
Yeah, no, thanks for them. They're saving their best game for the year for us. So, no, they played really well. All their balls stuck and they really turned it up for us, and we just went on songs.
A blunt assessment on the team's performance, he wishes he knew more about his ongoing neck problem.
It keeps happening and I don't know why.
Kurt Gidley can't put a finger on much either this week. His hand is under wraps with an injured thumb.
This is the last break we'll get before the end of the year, so everyone's got to look after himself and be set for next Friday night.
Among those hoping for the call to resume playing, Matt Parsons, Matt Jobson and Steve Simpson, who was forced out late last week. Meanwhile, Corey Hughes faces a one-week suspension after being charged with a dangerous throw on Danny Badiris early in the match. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
$22 million is needed for the full upgrade of Energy Australia's stadium, but according to the Premier, Newcastle hasn't put enough pressure on the federal government to match the state's funding.
I don't think, with respect, the region has really applied pressure.
So he's hoping a petition will do the trick. It will be circulated throughout the community.
I think you're going to find everyone in the Hunter wanting to put his or her name on this petition.
Players and the International Sports Centre Trust have welcomed the Premier's efforts. However, the Trust will still attempt to meet face-to-face with the PM to present its case. But only time will tell whether the petition will do anything to convince the federal government to come up with its share for the redevelopment. But the Trust remains hopeful.
They've never said no to us. So the longer they go without saying no, the closer they are to get to saying yes.
Meanwhile, the Premier also announced a package to save the Raymond Terrace courthouse from closing. $600,000 will be spent upgrading the holding cells at the Raymond Terrace police station. Lyndall Derrig, NBN News.
This little unit is one of 7,000 throughout the world that will be monitored over the next 5 years. Ross Whitelaw is in the high-risk category after suffering a cardiac arrest 3 years ago. His partner Karen is learning how to help save his life should he have a heart attack at home.
Press the flashing orange button now. Shock delivered.
The defibrillator takes the user through a sequence and then analyses the patient's heartbeat, recommending a shock or CPR. Emergency treatment delivered in less than a minute. 19 cardiac patients at the John Hunter Hospital will take part in the study. All will receive a video that teaches CPR. Only half will receive a home defibrillator.
We don't know, though, that in the hands of people who otherwise are not used to this sort of equipment, whether it will actually be useful or detrimental. It may actually delay them giving good CPR.
The ambulance service is supporting this new technology and can see its life-saving potential in the wider community. It's already identified 40 rural areas that could benefit from having their own defibrillator because the nearest ambulance is 20 minutes away.
The ambulance service are looking at those communities and trying to find people who may be willing and motivated enough to be able to start a first responder type program.
These inspections, and now there's just over...
That will be out for longer if they don't come to the table.
It's been a long 2 months for Matt Parsons, forced to watch on after a back operation. While match fitness will be lacking, Parsons shed around 5 kilograms during his recovery and he can't wait to get back.
Yeah, it has been a long 8 weeks and we've battled a little bit at times too, and it's been pretty frustrating watching from the sideline, but as I said, I'm very keen to get back. I've just got to borrow some boots off someone now. I'm not sure where I put mine.
He couldn't have timed his return much better, with a number of nights still in doubt for Friday's match against the informed Panthers. Among them, fellow forwards Andrew Price and Matt Jobson, while Adam Woolnough sought further medical tests on his neck. Others are persisting with a range of leg problems, but with rep players being asked again to back up, Parsons reckons it's the rest of the squad that has to aim up.
It's great to get them guys back and playing, but the responsibility then falls on everyone else's shoulders, the other 13 players that will be playing, to get in there and have a dig and try and look after them a bit. We're going to need them blokes at the back, at the back of the year, so we need to look after them now.
The side to play Penrith will be announced tomorrow.
This looks more like an ambulance officer's social than a hospital emergency room. Last night, the problems continued at the John Hunter. Instead of these officers dropping off their patients and continuing on to help others, they were tied up for more than 3 hours waiting for the hospital to accept them. Paramedics were off the road for hours while they minded an elderly patient in the car park. The hospital says its staff was stretched to the limit as 36 people turned up at the emergency department between 6 and 10 p.m.
Now, we operate a triage scale so that we see people in the priority on which their clinical condition dictates, and it does not necessarily go with the fact that you've come in by an ambulance. If there are sicker people in the waiting room, we see those first.
Dr Doolan says his staff tried hard to clear the backlog, as well as treating several patients injured in 2 car accidents.
During that same time period, between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m, it should be noted there were at least 6 ambulances that were offloaded in less than 10 minutes.
The hospital admits it needs more doctors.
We are actively recruiting doctors. We're happy to say another specialist started last week and we have another doctor starting in October. But at the end of that, we will still have 3 to 4 vacancies between John Hunter and Belmont Hospital.
The site, occupied for 40 years by Warners Bay Spares, attracted national interest but has been bought by a Hunter developer for $2.4 million. Owner Daphne Cook put the Hillsborough Road property on the market after deciding to end the family's long involvement in the spare parts industry.
A playing draw can make or break a World Cup campaign weeks before any ball is kicked, but Australia's outside chance only firmed after their pool position was confirmed overnight.
Australia will then be placed in Group D.
That means Australia will play preliminary games against world number 4 China, Russia and lowly ranked Ghana, with the top 2 pushing through to the quarterfinals. Not bad compared to Pool A, which has quickly become known as the Group of Death, with champions America against fellow powerhouses Sweden and North Korea. But no game will be easy.
You never have an easy beat in a World Cup, but yeah, like you just got to get out there and sort of get the Aussie spirit and battle, and you never know what's going to happen on a good day.
At just 19, Warners Bay teenager Hayley Crawford is one of Australia's new generation of stars, but she's still coming to terms with her selection. After having a break from competition last year, Danielle Small timed her return to football perfectly. And the 24-year-old will also head to her first World Cup in a side hardly impressed with her world ranking of 15.
No, not at all. Our previous ranking I thought we had was 11th, and we've done fairly well since then, so it is disappointing to see some of the teams in front of us that, you know, we've beaten away from home. But yeah, it's a good point to prove once we get over there.
Leading the side is fellow Hunter product Cheryl Salisbury, who will become the sole Matilda to have played in all 3 World Cups. The squad flies out for a pre-World Cup tournament in Japan on Monday. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
He's just unbelievable, so yeah, that'll be a good one.
On this day in 1969, the lives of these 20 men suffered a savage wartime blow. 3 Platoon, Alpha Company, 6th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment was serving in South Vietnam. After a successful morning patrol, their commander, Wonji-born Lieutenant Peter Hines, called his troops to a halt.
Probably around about lunchtime, Peter decided he was going to pull up and get a lock stat, which is a location statement, and let the troops sit down and have a bit of a rest, a cigarette and a cup of tea time, I think.
Minutes after giving his last order, the 27-year-old was a casualty of a landmine explosion. Today, to mark the 34th anniversary of their commander's death and the dedication of a memorial at Wonji RSL Club in his honour, the platoon paid its own mark of respect to the late Lieutenant Hines. The gathering also helping these ex-servicemen with their ongoing healing.
Most of us have managed to get a great weight taken off our shoulders because we've all been carrying our crosses and we've all been sort of concerned and worried and about how things went that day.
Peter Hines' wife Norma and son Shane participated in the service and believe he would have been humbled by the tribute.
Be so proud of them, he really would. They're wonderful.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
In one Hunter nursing home, 70% of residents suffered from chronic pain, which was unrelieved. The alarming statistic prompted Dr. Isabel Higgins to conduct further research as part of her PhD. Her findings have highlighted concerns about the aged care industry.
Many of the elderly residents were receiving medications for pain, but these medications were inadequate.
While diversional strategies such as painting can help some sufferers take their mind off the pain, the research found drugs such as Panadol are most frequently used for pain relief, but they are not always administered on a regular basis.
Panadol may not be the appropriate analgesic or pain reliever for the pain type that the elderly person has.
Dr. Higgins also found the majority of healthcare workers don't manage pain effectively.
So we have better understanding than what we've had in the past, and yet the knowledge of healthcare professionals is not good.
Quality standards have recently been introduced into aged care facilities, but Dr Higgins says attitudes also need to change to acknowledge that elderly people shouldn't have to suffer in pain. Lyndall Derrig, NBN News.
This site off Butterbar Road, Butterbar, could be described as the real estate investment opportunity of a lifetime. There are already prospective buyers, with the 113 residential lots to be sold by expression of interest from tomorrow for between $19,000 and $49,000. Developer's spokesman Peter Boyce admits it could be some time before homes are built here.
The contractor has that absolutely laid out very clearly that you can't build today, and it will be subject to council doing various development type things here.
Hunter developer Hilton Grujon has decided to sell because of what he claims are ongoing delays with Lake Macquarie Council to move the project towards construction. While this area is still bushland, initial planning is so far advanced I'm in what will become Abercane Crescent. Even lot numbers have been allocated, but Lake Macquarie Council needs to finalise a development control plan before building can start here. But Council contends environmental studies haven't been undertaken by the developer, and that's the reason for the delay.
Such as stormwater management, the provision of water, sewer, electricity, drainage, sedimentation, and in particular the protection of endangered plants and animals. It is a very significant environmental site.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
When the Master Builders Centre at Broadmeadow erupted in an inferno on Monday night, it took the Nisna Function Centre with it. Soon-to-be-married couples like Debbie Ann and Adam had booked the centre for their reception.
And we just thought it was a small fire and we thought everything would be fine. Not until the next day when my dad called me and said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "It's completely burnt down."
Centre owners Cheryl and John Nisner, who also run the Bella Vista Function Centre at Mayfield, have been quick to reassure clients that the 60 functions booked between now and Christmas will still go ahead.
Everyone was terribly shocked and didn't know what to expect. After speaking to all of them, they've been fantastic. We've put their mind at rest and just said, look, please give us 48 hours, give us a chance to catch our breath and find out what we're going to offer you, but we will still look after you and we can assure you you will still have the wedding that we've promised you.
We're negotiating now with some people to purchase or lease new function venues, and we will relocate people in the short term, and it's just not an issue. Everyone will be looked after.
And we're going to have it at the Madison, so we're quite happy about that. So and they're looking after it. It's just going to be the same, just a different venue, so everything will be exactly the same.